It's been a very super interesting research project that I had the pleasure to coordinate together with my colleague Francesca Rizzo, and together with a group of young researchers that gave a hand, in particular Felicitas, who is here with me, and who will deliver the second part of this short presentation. Well, SISCODE is a EU-funded research project which is dedicated to exploring how co-creation can be a means for operationalizing responsible research and innovation. We start from the consortium because it's very interesting, because it's really diverse, as we put together universities and research institutions with three core networks. EXCITE, the network of the science centers and museums, ENOL, the network of the Living Lab, and YAC, which is informally coordinating, as the network is not super formally established, the network of the Fab Labs. And we have what we call co-creation labs, namely members of these networks that acted as labs throughout our research process. I would move on with describing briefly the concept of the project. We have been focused on responsible research and innovation. As you know, it's a quite transversal area of studies, which is focused on bridging the gap between society and the development of science, technology, and innovation. It focuses on a number of subtopics and issues, and has some, well, let's say, specific problems with becoming a very operative concept, particularly in the case of practitioners. But this is something we see afterwards. I would move on with the presentation of the starting point of the project, which was a working definition of co-creation as a process in which we involve stakeholders and actors in ideating, implementing, and assessing a number of things, which might be products, services, policies, and even new systems, with two core aims. On one hand, improve efficiency and effectiveness of these products, services, policies, and systems, but also on the other hand, for better satisfying the needs of those who take part in the process. One part of the working definition is missing, which is relevant for what we are doing today, is also that we see co-creation as a way of putting together co-design and co-production, namely moving from simple stages of ideation to further steps in which you also concretely do things. And doing things is really at the core of this project, where we have seen co-creation as a bottom-up phenomenon that is actually flourishing across Europe, but needs to be investigated in terms of scalability and replication, and possibility to have cross-fertilization of practices. And RRI with the limitations that I mentioned before, in particular, an emphasis on ethical aspects and a focus which is more on science and science-based innovation rather than on other forms of innovation that are also relevant and that were particularly relevant for the kind of experiment that we performed in the project. In terms of methodology, The project is also very interesting because due to the diversity of the partners, we had the possibility of using a quite mixed up methodological approach where we have desk research that we perform by doing literature review in different silos, let's say, domains of knowledge that were not that much connected one with the other, in setting up and preparing some case studies. We combine this with field research. So part of the case studies implied not only desk research, but also field research. And which is maybe unique to this project, we had the possibility of combining these sources of knowledge with action research that we performed through and with our co-creation labs, which gave us the possibility of performing real-life experiments and trying to bridge these real-life experiments with the broader scene, in particular with the idea that we could possibly scale up solutions by reconnecting the solutions with the broader policy framework. And this was very interesting and led to many interactions, not only in the co-creation labs, but between the co-creation labs and the, let's say, broader institutional settings and context. I would leave room to Felicitas for the second part of the presentation.
Perfect, thank you so much. I would directly go in depth on the pilots' experimentation before actually giving the floor to the pilots to present their experimentations in details. At first, a little bit about the characteristics of this experimentation that we all conducted together. At first, all the co-creation labs addressed important issues and grand challenges of the society. They all involved stakeholders from the very beginning throughout the entire process of the solution development. They all applied participatory and co-design for the real implementation, so also the aspect that Alessandro mentioned previously, so not only sheer ideation of ideas and solutions, but actually then implementing them and producing these prototypes and ideas. And finally, reach a broader impact on the ecosystem and the policy landscape. So actually to reflect on how these quite small experiments usually are then impacting on the broader landscape. Thank you. All the pilots followed the same co-creation journey, which was designed in SISCODE, which is based on the process of design. And actually, they all started from the analysis of the context, so seeing the surrounding landscape, the stakeholders that were operating in that context, the potential final users, to then reframe the initial problem, so the societal challenge that was chosen, to then envision alternatives and ideate potential solutions. And in the final step that has actually been iterated, so has it been a loop in itself, the solutions were then developed and prototyped to be then refined and improved to be tested again. Getting to the objectives of the specific single pilot experimentation, at first everyone reflected on the wider impact that actually these quite small scale experiments could have in the future, or that they already caused in some way. Then new knowledge and some insights were generated on how actually co-creation can be applied in the context of responsible research and innovation. So how the application of co-creation could work in this context, also in the future. Then the building of some capacities and knowledge on co-creation and on the application actually of co-creation of methodologies and tools within the single labs. So usually the teams and the organizations that were working within these pilots. And then also having a broader transformation within the ecosystem, since all of the labs involved also a number of stakeholders, of actors, of end users, then to reflect on how these interactions and how this involvement actually could cause a transformation and a change within the surrounding ecosystem. The pilots were 10, spread all across Europe, as you can see in the map, being divided in living labs, fab labs, and science centers and museums as the three lab networks that were involved in the pilot. And here's a little preview on the prototypes that were developed. So I would directly leave the floor to the labs actually presenting their single cases. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Felicitas. And well, I'm very pleased to introduce our first speaker, our first pilot project presented by Grace Darcy from Science Gallery Dublin with their project Open Mind. And we are pleased also to have some external discussants today that are going to present their point of view and their reflections on these three pilot projects. The second one will be AI as co-spectators from Traces, presented by the director Matteo Merzagora. And then there would be BODYSOUND pilot project, which is actually the Polifactory pilot project, which I'm going to present to you. So I leave the floor directly to Grace Darcy from Science Gallery Dublin with their Open Mind.
Thank you, Carla.
You're going to share your screen, right?
Yes, I am going to do that now. You might see my very messy background, so forgive me. Okay, let's go. So my name is Grace and I work at Science Gallery Dublin. And just to give you a bit of context about, maybe some of you heard of it, maybe some of you haven't, but we're a space in Dublin City Centre, and we offer transdisciplinary exhibitions, events and education programmes, and a space for 15 to 25-year-olds in particular to develop ideas and to look at that space where art and science collide. So that focus on the 15 to 25-year-olds is always very important to us, and particularly in this project. So I suppose in this presentation, I'll be speaking to responsible innovation, but in particular with engaging with young people and how to do that with multiple stakeholders when young people are in the mix. So, our challenge that we set out to tackle with young people and lots of stakeholders was to develop mental health and well-being management with young people. So that was quite a territory that was unfamiliar to us. So the first step, like we knew it was important to the 15 to 25-year-old audience. It kept coming up in conversations with our exhibitions team, with our youth advisory group, and we knew it was a really good fit for this project to try and tackle. So our first step was to research that Alessandro mentioned. So this was a combination of desk research where we looked up statistics and we tried to map the landscape of mental health in Ireland for young people, what it's like. We tried to look at the policies that were in place. But I think the most important part that we actually did was to actually reaching out to young people and to try and ask them what their take on the problems that they faced in terms of mental health and well-being management, what they thought. So the way that we did this in the beginning was, we are quite lucky in Ireland that we at the age of 16, students have the opportunity to take a year that is less academically focused. It's called transition year. And those students are really open to coming and engaging in week-long programs, and they call it work experience. So we offered a week long program for students, and so we set out 3 weeks to try and create relationships and to try and ask young people themselves what their take on the issues were. So we did this by exploring mental health through art and science workshops. We got speakers in to try and talk to students. And also it was an opportunity for us to practice the co-creation toolkit that we hadn't used before. So we brought the young people through a design thinking sprint where they got to develop their own ideas and to go through the ideation process and to mock up their solution. So at the time, we thought this was our research. So we were trying to capture young people's surveys. We were trying to capture their opinions and insights on what it's like to be a young person in Ireland. But what we didn't realize at the time that was so valuable about this running this week was that it allowed us to create relationships with those young people. So we got to really build up the trust with them. And also it really allowed the young people to become quite familiar with the tools and the ideation and the prototyping before we invited in the other stakeholders. So while we were doing these weeks with the young people, of course, we were also talking to mental health researchers, and we were talking to clinicians and mental health charities. We were having chats and conversations and phone calls to try and get their take. But we put a particular focus on trying to build the relationships with young people quite meaningfully and in depth, because we knew that would be really important later on. So then once we had done that, we invited everyone into the room together. So this was the fun part. So we gathered a really wide mix of teachers and parents and researchers and of course young people. And we quite manually created that mix to happen in a room. We created an open call for people to get involved. So then we brought them through a series of 3 workshops where they went through idea generation, where we kind of set the context of what we wanted to set out and try and explore. So they came up with lots of ideas and threw them at the wall, and they really explored all the problems that young people face in Ireland or within mental health. And then they refined it down gradually, and we saw similar themes coming out consistently. And then they got to prototype that idea and actually realize it. So from the very beginning, we saw a really common thread come through in the ideation, where our stakeholders really concentrated on education and really concentrated on young people being equipped or young people learning how to manage their own mental health. So and they were quite concentrated on mental health and issues that young people face in a school context, because I guess that's where all of our young people in the room, that was their daily experience of mental health and stress and anxiety. It was quite frequently in a classroom setting. So for them, it was quite instinctive to try and create a solution that was also in the classroom. So we set out to try and develop a youth-centered wellbeing workshop content. So we ran up with our stakeholders. They devised the timeline, they came up with activities and the content that they wanted to explore, and then we dived in and tried to create that. So we threw that together and we came up with activities that a teacher could deliver, and then we piloted it first in 4 schools nationally. And we kind of intentionally, in choosing the schools that we wanted to pilot it in first, we selected schools that our stakeholders were members of, because we thought it was important that those stakeholders, after being in the room and coming up with an idea, that they saw that being realized in their own environment. That would kind of invigorate them, or that they would see it happening, that it wouldn't just be happening in the distance. So then after we facilitated the workshop and kind of saw it in action, we collected feedback from students and teachers. And then this process continued, where we got insights from teachers and students of what worked and what didn't work. So for example, in the beginning, there was a strong focus on creating a hobby club, because stakeholders felt really passionately that having a hobby or something that you are good at or that you can escape to is really positive to protect your well-being. So in the beginning, a lot of the program focused on creating that hobby club, but then as we refined it, and teachers, feedback from teachers kind of said that that mightn't be a sustainable model, that it pivoted more towards getting students to understand their own mental health and to create that, pursue that hobby kind of outside the classroom, and to look around the school and to identify problems that they can go on after that. But it really focused in a more sustainable, the iterations continued to kind of try and make the toolkit as sustainable as possible. So then I suppose reflecting back on involving young people in innovation and co-creation, we as a team kind of discussed or identified these core things that kind of helped to make it work. Particularly, I'm thinking back to the very first time where we had everyone in a room together and there was a real mix of dynamics. So I think that these core things might help to build success for anyone else that goes out to work with young people or involve youth in co-creation. So I think building trust is a really founding principle. So we kind of aim to be quite transparent, and we were quite lucky in this project that the project really made it so easy to us, because we were able to say, we have no stake in this, whatever you want, we can prototype. So that there was that trust that we weren't trying to steer, or we had no vision, or like we weren't trying to direct what was happening. It was placed in the hands of the stakeholders. And I think again that week that we put in with the young people beforehand was quite important, because they, having had that week in the gallery, they were able to have more ownership of the space. They had more trust in us as facilitators. They knew our faces and they felt more confident to speak out and be involved. And that was another thing. So recognizing power dynamics. So we knew that when we had everyone in a room together, it might be more difficult for a young person to get involved and speak out. And we kind of saw that transformation happen throughout the 3 workshops that we set out, where in the beginning, an adult might speak quite often. And then at the end, they were looking to a young person to kind of sign off and say, is that what you meant? So they were really looking to make sure that the youth voice was really embedded in there. So a way we did that was just kind of by constantly reiterating it, by really amplifying the youth voice as a facilitator, by literally giving the floor to them, and kind of seeing when someone was trying to speak and letting them pipe up. Another thing that we did was create a manifesto together. So kind of setting out the ground rules with everyone, so that kind of everyone is on an even a keel as possible to try and rebalance the invisible power dynamics that might be in the room. Another thing that we observed was being flexible to needs with youth. So for example, in the rollout of the pilot project, there was different schools that were involved that, although they were quite near to each other, the needs that were there were quite different, and we needed to recognize that and adapt our program to facilitate it as much as possible. And then another thing that I was quite cognizant of in terms of involving youth in co-creation was to try and use it to broker opportunities for them. So I think it goes along with kind of platforming their opinion and amplifying their voices, but identifying opportunities where they can be involved, so that instead of me speaking for them, or us as an organization speaking for them, that we're handing over the mic. So in that picture there, you have the Queen of Sweden meeting 2 of our youth stakeholders, because Callum and Roisin, because they were the most important ones in the process, the young people who had their experiences of what it was like as a young person in Ireland. So there's no point in us as an institution talking to them. It should be about the youth. So we tried to broker opportunities that young people could get out of being involved in in co-creation. And I think that happened quite organically in the process, because it was a chance for them to meet researchers and to be involved with a whole mix of people that they mightn't have met otherwise. So I think the co-creation process quite naturally brokers opportunities for them. And I think that's it. That's my final reflections.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Grace. And sorry, I have an echo that's it's fixed. I think that we will have a conversation with Emma Farrell maybe later on your project, because I guess that she had some time issue, because you know, here is 6 now, but in Dublin I think that is 5, so that might be some problems in setting the event. But anyway, we will have some minutes and some time to share her thoughts later on. So I would move on. I thank you very much for your presentation, and I'll talk to you later. And yes, an applause. I will leave the floor to Matteo Merzagora from Traces, and with this very interesting pilot project on AI, but this time as a co-spectator, so in a different position and in a different role compared to what we usually experience. So thank you very much, Matteo, for being here, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Carla. Do you hear me correctly?
We can't.
Yes, Matteo,
Okay.
we hear you very well.
Okay.
Great. So let me share my screen so that I can have the presentation going on. So I will ask again if now you see my slides correctly. Great, thank you very much. So as Carla was introducing, we were another one of the labs that did experimentation, and SISCODE was for us an absolutely great opportunity to both reflect on things that we were already doing and to explore a completely new way of approaching certain issues. TRAS is an association that deals with science in society issues, both by reflecting on it and producing action research or things that whatever you want to call, and by doing things in practice. And among the different things we do, we work specifically in underserved and underprivileged area and audience by placing knowledge in general and scientific knowledge in particular as a form of empowerment. And we run a small science center which is associated to a university in Paris, which is called Université Paris Sciences et Lettres. Which is a big, which collect many different universities. Let's see if, what I'd like to share with you today is our case, the journey that we did, artificial intelligence as spectators in cultural activities, and a couple of things that among the many that we were happy to learn during this journey that I'd like to share tonight, and namely how social innovation could and should be driven by cultural activities. That's one of the main issues. And the second, the fact that outcomes of co-creation can be open and can be very diverse for each of the stakeholder engaged, which is, I think, a characteristic of cultural activities that I'd like to underline and discuss with you if you find it also interesting as we did. the issue we wanted to tackle, the starting point is we want to, is an empowerment type of activities, and we want to empower citizens to live critically with artificial intelligence that are populating our life today. We live in an age in which our personal and professional decisions are very often assisted by algorithms, which goes from deciding which train to take to go from A to B, which metro line to take, down to a decision, a medical decision, or the decision of a partner in our love life. We are assisted by algorithms. And we started, our starting point is not exactly research in the common sense, it's an exhibition. But exhibitions, the way we used to do exhibitions is we conceive them as a platform for exploring an issue, not to present, but to explore. And so for us, the exhibition, The Science of Choice, Sous Influence was the title, French title, was essentially an exploration of the topic about the presence of algorithm in our daily life and in our choices, but also thanks to this SISCODE introduction and crossing, a platform for co-creation. That is a place driven and thematized by the exhibition in which different stakeholders could meet. So the exhibition is actually, and especially the what we call the incubation phase of the exhibition, is a sort of a platform for crossing and meeting around a common issue, different stakeholders. Stakeholders that, in our vision, do not have necessarily the same problems and the same desire to seek a solution. They might be completely different. So we want to stage creative situations that satisfy multiple and independent agendas, which could be what you see on the slide is some of this. We had artists involved, which were looking for new ideas to treat artificial intelligence, together with researchers, together with educators, but each one had probably a different objectives, but they all found an interest being there in this co-design team, as called, for a few months of the development of this project. So this is something that I'd like to come back in the conclusion to as one of the key learning that we had about how co-creation works applied to responsible research and innovation and social innovation. The starting point, thanks to this, I don't go in details, but we had a lot of different meetings with different shapes. Some were very playful, some were very like workshop, very co-creation oriented. Others were interactive events, but taking the shape of a usual round table, let's say, but always with an observer from our side was collecting information. So all the spectrum was explored. And our main point that we came to highlight is the fact that in today's world, the first readers and the first spectators of the great majority of our cultural productions are algorithms. And what we said, okay, since this is true, and it is, whatever you post on Facebook, which is a form of expression that you have, is first read by algorithm and then by people. Algorithms that, for example, check if you have racist propositions or you use grossy wording. And afterwards, you have the audience for which you wrote the text. I actually did a test, but it didn't work because I posted, in order to advertise this today's event, I posted something trying to catch up the attention of Facebook algorithm, but they are quite slow. So they did modify the translations that in French, for example, of my message that you can read, that I will not read loud since we are recorded. And but they did not check. Well, okay, test failed. So our idea is, since algorithms are our first reader, so let's make cultural products that are intentionally made for algorithms. About this fact of algorithm as first spectator, I'd like to underline that we live in a chaotic mixture of virtual, online and on-site, and artificial and real, and etc. For example, in this area here, I think you see my pointer, the blue balloons. These are tricks that people that post on YouTube use to escape from the control of YouTube algorithm. So they place on a video that should not be posted because of copyright, they overimpose some elements at a certain moment, which will defeat the algorithm and escape and be able to pass by. So, I mean, these balloons are there only for algorithm. They are an aesthetical thing that is produced because the algorithm are the spectators. And of course, this is Simon Weckert, a German artist work, which is emblematic of this type of work. What he did, he was carrying on 99 cell phones with a Google map activated, so to generate a traffic jam, which actually was used by Google Maps to divert cars so that they did not go where he was actually alone with 99 cell phones. So another way to talk to algorithm explicitly. What in a scheme, what we did, sorry for the simplistic scheme, but the classical situation is where you have an author, a performance, a concert, a theater show, an exhibition, whatever, and a target group, which is human, which is assisted by some artificial intelligence, which will probably tell him that the bus line A is faster than the bus line B to get to this point, and it will assist it by giving information about the price, sometimes just pure information, sometimes with an element of artificial intelligence. And our shift was to say, let's make the human person an assistant, which is accompanying an artificial intelligence to see the show. So it becomes a target. So a little bit like when we accompany a child to a place. Actually, the best type of definition that we gave was to talk about them as co-spectators, the human person and the target group. The first exploration we did in this sense was a theater monologue in a theater in Paris. This was a title, which was observed by 10 different artificial intelligence. They are the list down here. So each spectator was carrying one and observing this monologue by systems that were actually interested in many different things, like recognizing what the actor was wearing, translating in a different language what the actor was saying, or maybe identifying also where you could buy the things the actor was wearing or the position of the actor, which is the reasons why they were made, this artificial intelligence. But I think we thought it was extremely rich to look at the same cultural production with these different eyes that are indeed all the time with us nowadays and even more in the future. And then we went on a series of events of this type. For example, here we are in Cannes, in Paris, where in France, where there is a Living Lab festival. And a sort of a science festival inspired on the Living Lab methodology. And what we did is we asked the audience to take artificial intelligence system made for the visually impaired, for people that cannot see, that help them recognize space, that are in test on the main in Google and Apple and etc. And to see what they will see of a science festival. Because they are made for people who cannot see, but these people could see. So I think you see the richness of the situation that were also observed by researchers, by artists, and etc. And I think I'm running a bit late, so I will skip some of the other situations, which were, for example, inviting an artificial intelligence, the one of an artistic group called Data Dada. In France that developed an EA for artistic purposes, and to see and to try to pilot the behavior of this artificial intelligence by a very simple machine learning algorithm that we embedded in the Zoom conference. outcome is a sort of a protocol. I will not get into the details of this, of course, on how to look at the artificial intelligence which accompany our experience of cultural activities, and how to accompany them to see an exhibition, to see a theater show, to see a concert, and etc. That we are now trying to apply to many different situations and invite all the stakeholders that you saw at the beginning to reflect on what it means to be together in life with artificial intelligence. This is a way to make it explicit. And we are now running the same type of activities together with high school students that are designing their own type of experiments, thanks to the Île-de-France region that was one of our policy-making stakeholders and now support the continuation of this project. In terms of learning, I will be very fast on this. Our main conclusion was that we observed that many models of social innovation, even when applied to completely non-technology based innovation, but are shaped by the way technological development works. However, sorry for the typo, indeed, society mainly innovate through culture, through the type of mechanism of change that are triggered by culture. So our conclusion is that co-creation processes can be of two types. We observed that. One is in which the getting together of different stakeholders and of different perspective, knowledge, interest, and etc. is aligned toward common solution. And this we will call the technological model, which is a convergent situation. So people get together, they identify a common problems, and they look for a common solution. But culture does not work like that. So in co-creation, when applied to cultural activity, can be something that serves independent solutions of autonomous issues. So that is divergent, so that people get together, they find very juicy and interesting situation, out of which they take independent solutions. So in a scheme, co-creation can be applied directly to policy making in order to generate change which is suitable for the end user, or as culture influence any type of policy making and the way we make choice. Co-creation can act directly at the cultural level, as we tried to do in our case, and by this influence a change which is suitable for the end users. So I think this is it. Yes, this I will not leave long enough for you to take it, but if you want to take a screen capture, you can have more information about our projects, and this is it. Thank you, and sorry, I think I was 3 minutes too long.
Thank you very much, Matteo. And well, I will leave the floor to Fernando Villarino. Correct me if I'm wrong with the pronunciation, who is Associate Director of the Computer Vision Center at the Universitat Autónoma de Barcelona. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation, Fernando. And well, in terms of you were invited because you are an expert in this field. So, well, I ask you to intervene and to comment on Tracy's pilot project. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carla. Excuse me, because I had to miss the first minute, not the not Mateo's presentation, but at the beginning. So excuses for that. But I had the pleasure to be in the presentation of Mateo's that I enjoyed very much, and I would like him to keep on speaking and showing more examples, because I found it really really interesting. Probably in my role on commenting and discussing the contribution that Matteo has provided, I will use two perceptions or 2 points of view. The first point of view is what I perceive is this in this role of innovation in societies with culture as a vehicle. I would say that we are, and this is something that I've been working in the past months. We are assuming that we can observe the changes, right, and react to what is happening. But particularly in the context of artificial intelligence, I think that this is not the case. The impacts that are going to happen are to be unveiled, are to be observed. And I would say that these co-creation actions, and particularly through the area of culture, that allows engagement in the community in the language that the community can understand, is one of the vehicles that we can have to unveil the impacts, which is not easy task. And definitely this will not happen through a strong regulation framework or through directives or guidelines. And this living approach of the impacts or potential impacts, I liked very much. The second thing that I can start in this, let's say, discussion approach is, I would say that the example of Hamlet in the gym is very important, because it illustrates that artificial intelligence, and I connect this with the previous unveiling element, artificial intelligence can be used to create narratives. And all these algorithms provide multimodal narratives, or in other words, they explain the reality from different points of view. And we have the chance to get these interpretations. And this is an enormous power that we are having so far, because it's instantaneous and it can be connected. So this narrative power of artificial intelligence is also something that historically has been linked to the humans, to the storytelling, to the communication, etc. But now algorithms can create strong narratives and reproduce these narratives in a sustainable way. And the third comment that maybe I can go through for this excellent presentation that I really enjoyed is the component of co-creation into policy making. The component of co-creation as the first step for policy making. I would add something here that we are working at Universidad Autónoma de Barcelona together with the Catalan government and other municipalities, which is the component of citizen science. This is relevant because it helps us not only to develop engaging participatory actions, but to inject the scientific process as part of the co-creation process. And this could provide, let's say, a deeper dimension into this unveiling through the narratives that the algorithms are creating. And now I'm trying to connect these three keywords, right? The unveiling, the narrative, and the co-creation, particularly through the element of citizen science, right? Citizen engagement and citizen science. This would be my first approach to the that I would like to discuss. The second approach is focused on the performative part, right? So I would like to focus on the performance. We had we have discussed about this in other meetings. We have had the pleasure to participate with one living lab of our network, of the European network of living labs. And now I put my hat on of a living labber, right? Which is linked to one of the most prestigious companies in street performing arts. And they have developed Epica Lab, which is in the metropolitan area of Barcelona, which is a place in which actors, neighbors, scientists, and policymakers, basically from the municipality and the Catalan government, are joining together in the co-creation of the performance and the workshop is the co-creation of the performance. In Epica Lab, one of the enabling factors is technology, and artificial intelligence has been playing a role here. And when I was looking at this Hamlet in the gym, for instance, we have developed in the Computer Vision Center some tools for automatic understanding the behavior of people while they are interacting. So our machines can tell you if Carla and I are upset and we are discussing, or if we are happy or the conversation is going well, and then we are going to have some beers, and we can predict that we will have a successful meeting of our European project, or the other way around, based on our multimodal interaction in images, sounds, etc., gesture, facial expressions, etc. So we included that into the process of creating this street performance. And this is very interesting because this means, and I get back to the component of science together with the artistic, with the co-creation process, that we can have clear examples about what is acceptable and is not acceptable for our algorithms to do, with let's say an exploratory actions that can happen in our cultural arenas. Performing arts and street art is a clear example there, because you don't have to engage with people. People are there, they're already there. But also probably this will reshape also the concept of museums, or will reshape also the concept of accessing static pieces of art. So my last, this would be one dimension that I definitely would like to connect to the previous one for the scientific part. And my last comment would be regarding how do we treat this as an infrastructure level? And I think that this is something that, with the policy component that the SISCODE project is having, could be also very interesting, also for future projects. We had, and in my own little lab, an experiment in which we were translating the public library into a place where to explore how the technology transforms the cultural experience of people. And we created an action called Experiment AI. And in Experiment AI, every month, our researchers were bringing their demo, mean technology transfer, an object that you can touch and interact with, that it is the illustrator of what the algorithm can do. So we created a general discussion about the ethical components of what could happen, because we don't have the algorithm. It's in TRL 4, probably 5. So we're going to develop that as a product in the future, but this did not happen yet. And this is the exciting thing. So we can advance these impacts. We have to unveil these impacts. And through this translation of public libraries into places where knowledge now appears from other stakeholders, such as universities, in order to interact with the library users in a context of sharing knowledge and providing innovation actions, probably we can reuse what we already have, which is infrastructures of knowledge now reshaped, not for knowledge in books only, but also for knowledge in people, and probably also in software. So this would be my approach and my first reaction, my very first reaction to Matteo's presentation. But definitely, I think that I was enjoying that so much that probably I could have been speaking for 1 hour.
Yeah, indeed, and it's a huge pleasure to listen to you and to all this reflection. That I think that your conversation with Matteo could continue also after this.
Oh, it will.
Yeah,
sure. That's the main impact, I think, also of these meetings and these projects, is that if they start conversations that will last longer. It happened with Science Gallery a while ago when first meetings.
But unfortunately, we can. And but fortunately, we are going to have the previous conversation that we missed for the Open Mind project from Science Gallery Museum with Dr. Emma Farrell, that is here with us, from School of Education of the University College of Dublin. Well, I leave the floor to you. I kindly ask you to take a few minutes, and I also invite you to continue the conversation after these events. I also invite all the participants to write us on our social media or our private emails in order also to continue the conversation with them, because unfortunately we only have half hour left, and so we have to speed up a little bit. And thank you, Fernando, thank you, Matteo, and I invite Emma Farrell and Grace Darcy to have their conversation.
Well, thank you, Carla. And firstly, my sincere apologies for being late. I misread the time zone, so I'm an hour behind everybody else. So my apologies on that front. But I have had the pleasure of talking to Grace, reading the materials that the team produced. And really, when we spoke in advance of this, and Carla, you were there as well, what we found was that we started up a really rich dialogue. And I think for everyone here this evening, and even listening to the last presentation, so much of co-creation, so much of this work happens in dialogue. So rather than me speaking at any great length, what I thought we might do is that I might pick out some of the really interesting points from my perspective, I suppose, as a mental health professional who has done considerable amounts of work in mental health and in schools, and maybe open those issues up a little bit more. Because Grace, I think the first thing that struck me was, first of all, the admiration for taking on the problem, as you posed it, of youth mental health. Because as we know, there are as many problems and solutions in terms of mental health as there are people. It's not a one-size-fits-all sort of an issue. And I think so much of our efforts to solve the problem or address the problem of mental health issues in young people tend to focus on the individual. And sometimes that raises questions for a lot of us, really, and that, yes, of course, as individuals, there's a lot we can do to take care of our mental health. And the work you and the team have done has just been a fine example of that. But then equally, are we bypassing the bigger, broader social issues like poverty, trauma, abuse, all the different forms of discrimination, inequality and inequity? Are we kind of giving those in power who have a potential to address these bigger issues a bit of a get out of jail card by focusing on what can you do to, deal with your mental health? And I wonder what did you have to say in response to that?
I agree with you, Emma. It's such a difficult issue, and mental health is encompassed in lots of different pockets of society, and there is inequity. And so, for example, I know it's very difficult, like, let's say, take an issue like homelessness, that could be a really challenging issue that is directly correlated to someone suffering from mental health issues. So from one side, our solution, which is like a toolkit for young people to improve their well-being or manage their own well-being, doesn't solve that. And I can be very critical of that. I can see that, but I suppose all I can say is that when our stakeholders were in the room, they really did pin onto education. And I guess that there was that moment of, let's make it happen in the classroom. And I don't know why exactly that was. Maybe it was because it was an empowering thing that they felt that they could achieve, that they could do. And if they went down the avenue of homelessness, that might have, or like some other really prevalent issue like poverty, that underpins mental health issues, that maybe that couldn't have been as achievable. So that's a really interesting one to answer. And I'm wondering if the reason that our stakeholders did go down the avenue of education is because it felt more feasible, and everyone in the room, all the young people in the room, understood mental health from a classroom context, and their personal issues. For example, like a lot of them mentioned things like relationships. So like how to manage friendships, how to manage relationships, those kind of things were a big source of stress. So I know it's managing mental health in a really niched way, and I suppose because it felt possible to our stakeholders, I know that our stakeholders consistently said that being involved in the process and creating something and creating a solution kind of was intrinsically good for their mental health, because they got to be part of tackling something. So although it was a small part in a much bigger pond, the process of innovating and coming up with ideas and meeting people was really positive for everyone in that room, because they got to see it realized.
Yeah, and I think the thing for me that really came through going through the materials you developed is that word empowerment, the word you use yourself, in that it's not about solving or fixing people, it's about creating that bit of momentum, that empowerment for a positive outcome. And I really liked hearing you talk when we spoke about what happened in that room, and you mentioned it there now. And that idea of involving stakeholders and making sure that the people who are most affected by this are at the heart of it all is such an essential idea, but it's not exactly the most straightforward of ideas either at times. And I wonder if you could bring us into the room, some of the things that maybe surprised you or challenged you in that co-creation with such a broad range of stakeholders.
I think the one thing that I took away, or was that most impactful for me, was the transformation in our stakeholders. That in the beginning, like we reached out to mental health experts and charities, and we said, oh, we really want your opinions in the room, and your insights are really important. So everyone was in the room, and everyone felt that they're, of course, that everyone's opinion is so interesting, but there was such a transformation by the end of it that they all valued the youth insight the most. So that the power dynamics that I noticed, or the shifting relationships through the journey, that in the beginning all the adults in the room were eager to speak and they were the expert in their field, and the young people maybe were more timid or didn't know how to talk in a room of adults. And then by the end of it, there was this transformation of the experts turning to the young person and saying, is that right? Like, is that what you meant, or is that what you're happy? So I think that was the magic moment for me in the process, was to see our stakeholders really get it, that they went on this journey and realized the value of co-creation and what it's about. It's not about their opinion, it's about everyone's opinion.
Yeah, and I love that idea of the magic of the process and the magic of what that co-creation created. But then you also took that magic and went into a school environment, which, and I don't know what the schools are throughout Europe, but in Ireland, certainly schools as an institution haven't changed all that much for hundreds of years, really, or a number of years. And so you were taking this creative, dynamic magic and trying to fall into step with an institution that, yeah, it's quite rigid and doesn't do change very quickly, or doesn't do magic very quickly, for want of a better way of describing it. What was that like, and how did that work?
Well, I suppose in co-creation, the end is undefined. Like, there is no, you're finding that answer out together. So we were going in and we knew we were running out the pilot, and the aim was that the students would create a hobby club. But for schools, that it's such a formal environment that even that unknown was quite difficult for schools to manage. But what I observed was that there was such a difference in need. For example, there was one school who was so well behaved. They were really positive in the classroom when we were delivering the well-being content. And there was another school 100 meters down the road who were so bold, like the students were so boisterous and noisy when we were delivering the well-being content. But then when we shifted over to develop, to say, okay, this is the co-creation part where you students have to co-create a hobby club, there was a split where the well-behaved students were uncertain and maybe didn't know how to, like, when the responsibility was handed over to them, they maybe didn't have the confidence or didn't know what was expected of them. And the bold students, I use the word bold, who were more boisterous, were incredible. They were up on their feet. They were taking surveys of first year students to say, oh, well, we can't decide the hobby club. We need to survey other students. And they were out the door before I even know it happened. So that was such an interesting dynamic to explore the different cultures in schools and the different reactions of students to a co-creation challenge.
And I think that's what your project really brought to life for me, about how much we can learn from the process, how much we can learn from bringing ideas and bringing them into the real world and watching that magic unfold as you described. I suppose for me, and I'm conscious, Carla, we're behind time as well, but I suppose I just want to echo what Fernando said and about Matthew's presentation, and that this is a conversation that I hope we will keep going. I think what you've done is create something, and I like that word magical, something really special, and it is such a positive and empowering step in addressing that bigger problem of mental health and young people's mental health. So I'm really excited to see where it goes next. And yeah, thank you very much for inviting us along this evening.
Thank you very much for being with us. And well, I think that all these conversations should go on after this. And I would like to share with you my screen for the last presentation, which is going actually to be the Polifactory pilot project. I hope that my screen, okay. So first of all, well, this project was participated by several people. With me today, there are Stefano Maffei and Laura Cipriani, but also we had Massimo Bianchini, Mirko Gelsomini that developed actually our final solution, and then also some collaborators for the sound and also for the dashboard development. And well, our challenge was in the realm of healthcare and well-being, I would say. We call it BODYSOUND, which is actually also the name of our final solution. And our challenge and our goal was that of trying to co-create a solution to improve the movement of children with cerebral palsy. We framed our challenge thanks to research, interviews, etc. So we identified the music and sound stimuli as an element that could have to characterize our final solution. We developed this process and the final solution in collaboration with the FightTheStroke Foundation, which actually includes families and caregivers of children with cerebral palsy. So, and then in order to let you, let's say, understand how the definition of the challenge also changed through time and over time, we decided to be more focused on sports and play than on healthcare for several reasons that I'm not going to explain here because we don't have time. But we wanted to be focused on these so-called 6 F words, identified also from the World Health Organization, which are function, well, family, fitness, fun, friends, and future. So what is BODYSOUND? Well, the final solution in very few words. BODYSOUND is a video game platform for motor reactivation through music, aimed at medical, health, and sports specialists. However, how did we get there? Well, I think that now you all know that we go through a co-creation process that included several stakeholders over a pretty long period of time. So we had several co-creation workshops using these SISCODE tools, the tools that actually were developed by the scientific directors and the partners of a SISCODE project. And we involved both caregivers, but also policymakers, therapists, etc. I want to stress here, since Polifactory is a makerspace and fab lab, the so-called power of prototyping. So the fact that we started from the very beginning of the project to materialize our ideas was a way to, in some way, was giving us the possibility to verify them, to reframe them, and also to improve the final solution. So prototypes are actually also defined as boundary objects, so are also means of conversation with stakeholders that might not be well, coming from your field, and in order to explain what you would like to do, what are your goals, well, the materialization is an effective way. And we did it with the children. So even if, as I said, the final solution was actually a video game, is actually a video game, we also involved children in physical interaction with sounds. So we had these experimentation labs where children could, let's say, experiment with different kind of objects. Some of them were created here from Laura, actually, at Polifactory. Other were already existing on the market, and other again were actually developed by Polifactory, but also in collaboration with the engineering department. And also about prototyping and testing, I mean, the quick and dirt way of going on, we included therapists. So these are the therapists, young therapists that are collaborating with FightTheStroke, actually, that came in Polifactory to test the first solutions. And here, there are also some internal tests and some tests that we did by distance, because then COVID arrived. And so we had, actually, we had the opportunity to further develop our idea, thinking about a final solution that could be used without physical interaction, or at least without being in the same place at the same time. Very important, again, the test with children. And even if we started with a specific target group of children with cerebral palsy, we could test the game with other children, with all children from different schools. And this is particularly important for us because, I mean, the scalability of the idea and of the project starts maybe from a smaller group that have specific needs and specific issue, but this doesn't mean that the same game and the same solution cannot be used also by other children. So here there are our last tests. How body sound working now. Probably can't hear music. However, here you see that the game is based on following the movement of the dots. Okay, it's based on following the movement of the dots and creating a music through your body and your correct, let's say, movements. And to conclude our presentation, I want to prepare the floor for Francesca Lanfranconi, that is going to speak after me, about the importance of hearing the voices of children. It was very interesting for us to understand that for them, body sound is intuitive. We didn't explain the game before they could play with it, but they immediately understood how to play the game. So they understood about the matching colors of hands and dots. They understood that they had to follow the rhythm. They understood and they heard that the music was changing according to the movement. And also they were very careful about little elements of the game that, I mean, weren't so explicit in a way. And also they were entertained by the game. So for them, the objective was, wasn't winning because they also received some score, but it was having fun. And also they reflected on the game itself. First of all, a kid told us that if he knew the music, he would probably get distracted by it. So he appreciated the fact that the music were unknown. They asked us how we made the dots moving, so we could explain them how we actually developed the game. They asked us if they could use it from their computer and TV. They were talking about the scalability of our project. They suggest us to sell body sound in stores. So we were very satisfied and pleased by the reaction of children. And I have to say that I was worried about the fact that children are, you know, used with very incredible games nowadays, that our game was so simple, but actually probably they didn't have so great expectation and they had fun anyway. So talking about sports and the involvement of children, the capability of rehabilitation that sports and having fun can have also in a medical environment, I would ask Francesca Lanfranconi to reach me, and if you want, Francesca, I can show your slides for you.
Thank you.
And so you can add some more reflection on body sound from your perspective, but actually from your daily work.
Thank you, Carla.
Francesca, we can't hear you, sorry.
Oh no, why not?
I hear perfectly.
Okay.
We can also hear.
Carla, you can't hear me, but the other can hear me.
Yeah, I can.
Okay. So I can start, Carla. Okay, I start. So thank you, Carla and Stefano and Laura for inviting me to this beautiful event. And I have already learned a lot of very sexy words as co-creation, co-design, common solution, independent solution. And I think that I will use a lot of these words in my next medical congress. And so instead of using only plain anatomical words, I will use also some of your beautiful words. And probably from your definitions, I am a possible stakeholders or an end users. And effectively, I was invited to Polifactory for a workshop on body sound that is a possible product for children with palsy, with cerebral palsy. But because I work in a hospital with children with cancer, I can really say that probably one product made with the co-creation process probably can fit different fields and can be open to different utilization. And in our case, we work using the precision exercise in children, adolescents, and young adults with cancer. And you can use this kind of therapy to very frail patients. You can see in this picture, you have a stem cell transplanted adolescent. He's very frail, but nonetheless, he can do exercise, and he can do also some sport. Is it safe to use exercise and having fun, but also impact all the different systems that are involved in doing exercise in very frail patients? Effectively, there are more and more groups all over Europe, some dreamers, as you two are, that think that it is possible. And why we need to use exercise in our patient? Because we know that due to the therapies, to chemotherapies and radiotherapies, and the bed rest, because these patients have to spend many weeks inside their rooms in hospital or at home, they face a condition like that one that is present in astronauts. So it's like a microgravity condition where their systems, the lungs, the cardiorespiratory pump, and the muscles lost efficiency. And so this is a very bad situation that we have to face. How we can face this situation? In our hospital, we have a skilled team that face the necessity of our patient. Here you can see a young toddler. He is 2.5 years old. He seems a normal child, of course, but he faced 2 stem cells transplant. And so he's still really inefficient from an exercise point of view, and he can't walk properly. But anyway, we find other solution for him. In that case, he's using a no pedals bike or a balance bike so he can't anyway afford his exercise. And so we need specific human resources to face this condition. The usual one are pediatricians, sports medicine, medical doctor, exercise physiologist, and of course we have also technical instructor, students, because we need some people that do the dirty works, and our charity that help us in found our project. But finally, we discover another figure that I will show you. Yes, et voila. We discovered the co-creating designer. So who is that person? Is a strange person that asks you to do strange things, like pinpoint paper somewhere, or use colors to do some other things, that ask you many embarrassing questions, that use a lot of time in asking, and send you a lot of emails and so on. And when you are sure that he can't really understand what you are doing, he will show you a product that is exactly what you need. So I hope that everybody will have a co-creating designer in his team. And why we need a multidisciplinary approach in our specific hospital setting, because we have to use our body, the body of our frail patient, in all the ways that is possible to use. And in order to do this, you need to motivate our patient and to have a high adherence to our sports therapy. And if we can use any kind of devices, as also BODYSOUND potential showed us, we can really have a bigger impact on their health and on their quality of life. We need also to evaluate a lot of outcomes, because we are physiology researchers. And so we really need any help in order to evaluate all the different possible conditions that we can evaluate. And so I think that products as BODYSOUND has the opportunity to be customized also when you have to use them in very complex and specific context. And finally, as you, sport therapy will go to Europe, because actually we won a European grant, and so there will be 9 centers all over Europe that will use sport as a therapy in children with cancer. And so I think that I will suggest to everybody to look for a co-creation designer near around, in order to help them to find other solution for their experimental set. As regard the children with in frail condition, as are those with cerebral palsy or our children with cancer, I think that you already know that they have no limits of resiliency, and so everything that we can use to help them will really improve their condition. and Mike.
Thank you very much, Francesca.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you for being our ambassador everywhere. Thank you.
And Carla, I have two specific questions for you regarding body sound. Yes, sure. And regarding the co-creation process that you used. I would like to know if being in co-creation process in a medical field and more with children, if you face the specific ethical aspects.
You mean if we experienced these ethical aspects, but in terms of, you know, let me say bureaucracy, or personally, I mean, some personal issue with, you know, the condition, the specific condition of our participants. Well,
yeah, I think that usually they go together. You have some bureaucracy, but you have to some personal condition that you have to face.
Yeah, well, I always mention the fact that we spend the very first month of co-creation only with the caregivers and children. So we wanted to build a trust environment, and this takes time. And I mean, we probably went, well, we didn't really respect the rules of the project because of these ethical issues. So we wanted to have this couple of months to dedicate only to one specific stakeholder, or actually two, so the children and the parents. And for sure, we know that even if children don't have expectation, as I said before, they were very free, open to experiment. This is not the same for parents, for caregivers. So you need to pay maybe more attention to them than to the attention that you pay to the children in terms of you know, trust and engagement, because children are already engaged. I mean, they came here, they were very excited about being in a different place, known in a medical environment. And I mean, this was the point. For sure, we didn't promise a solution for their problems, because I mean, we couldn't be able to respect this promise, for sure. And it wasn't, I mean, the final goal of SISCODE. I mean, the SISCODE project is meant to have experimentation, and starting from this point, maybe to go further, to go on. And this is actually our goal, to not to stop at the end of SISCODE project, but trying to go on to develop this solution that might not solve the problem, which I mean, also doctors have the objective and the competencies to approach and to deal with. But for sure, we could support in a way the work that the therapists do, and also the well-being and the say the play of children while they are, you know, exercising, and they are reactivating their limbs or so. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. I think that when you have to face children and adolescents, you have to face especially parents. So the main problems can come from families, or maybe the main support can come from them too. And so I would like just to know if I was really intrigued by the power of a prototyping slide. And I was thinking that if these same children will experiment also the final product, or if they are involved just in one phase of the co-creation process, because I think that you will raise some expectation, and then maybe.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, the final was experimented in school, and we couldn't experiment it with the children from FightTheStroke community, because we couldn't have them here in our space because of COVID. This is the main reason why. So we are waiting for a better moment to involve and to invite all the children that participate in the initial phase to have this final experience here with us. I think that we are running late, Francesca, unfortunately. We should continue our conversation as well as the other couples, let's say, maybe in a different setting. And I think that we all hope to see each other face to face as soon as possible. Yeah, well, thank you very much to all the attendants. I want to thank you, all the pilots, Tracy's, Science Gallery Dublin, Matteo and Grace, but also Emma, Fernando, Francesca, and especially Alessandro Deserti and Felicitas Schmittinger for being here. And for me, it was a very interesting talk. And we all hope to go on with this chat, also informal chat. It was very, very good. Do you want
Thank you, Carla, and thank you all.
I want to thank you, everybody. It's
Thank
a
you.
good first step, as I was saying at the beginning. So I hope that this conversation could end up in something that could be, as in our tradition, pragmatic. So developing further concepts, idea, or even prototypes together.
Thank you very much. So you can reach us from our social networks or emails, and please do it if you want additional information. But now the time is really over. Thank you very much. Ciao.
Thank you, Carla. Thank you all.
Ciao.
Have a nice evening.
You
Thank
too.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.